Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I recently did a video on fishing ultra pressured bodies of water, and I got really good feedback on that, but I did have a couple of questions regarding, well, what happens if those baits don't work? Well, in that scenario, I generally have two options. One, you can go much bigger. So I'm talking like glide baits or really big spinner baits, just baits bigger than normal, because on those lakes that are very, very pressured, oftentimes the majority of people are all throwing finesse baits, and therefore the fish don't ever see very big baits like a glide bait. So it can be a very good option to go with a much bigger bait. My first option, though, is to go with what I call micro baits. And what I call micro baits, I'm talking about panfish baits. They are baits small enough that you'll catch a bunch of crappie, bunch of bluegill, yellow perch, rock bass. They're just very, very small baits. I call them micro baits, bass candy, smallmouth nuggets. You know, they're just small baits that it's kind of that idea of if you present a fish with an M&M, they're going to eat it regardless of whether they want it or not, just like I'll eat an M&M if you put one in front of me. So I want to talk about some of these micro baits and some of my favorite ones. But before I get into that, I do want to remind you guys that if you want to support the channel, you can head over to fishthemoment.com. The link is in my description, and get a lake breakdown for one of the lakes in your area. I've got a whole bunch that are done. But if I haven't done one that's in your area, you can always request a personal lake breakdown for the specific lake that you want. Also, in the description, I've got the link to my Tackle Warehouse affiliate deal. So if you take that link and do some shopping at Tackle Warehouse, you'll end up supporting the channel. We make a few percentage points off of each order that's placed. So it's something that does really help support the channel and shows me that you guys are enjoying the content and want to support the channel. Okay, so these baits that I call micro baits are some of the best baits that are out there, in my opinion, when it comes to this category. They are baits that I have used all over the country in really tough situations and had some experiences where it's almost mind-blowing how well they work. You know, I had one event where I was fishing a tournament on Lake Murray a few years ago where I had fish that I had been seeing the entire time, one of which was in the Forest Wood Cup that I was at, and I just saw the fish. He was up on a bluegill bed, and I could not get that fish to commit to anything. I was throwing topwater baits, wacky rigs, and the fish never left the area. I mean, I checked it 2 or 3 times each day. Never got any interest until I put one of these micro baits on, and it was like they had never seen it before. It swam right up to it and ate it. And I've had so many instances like that it really is surprising to me that there are not a lot more micro baits on the market. I mean, some of the ones that aren't even bass based are like your hair jigs, like marabou, crappie jigs can be dynamite on bass. You know, any of your smaller plastics like gulp. Berkeley makes all kinds of gulp baits that are meant for panfish and trout that can be killer on bass at times. So let's talk about some of the ones that I've got right here with me right now. The first one was really a hot bait for a while. It's of all of these, it was probably the one that had the most notoriety, but it was only for about a year or so, and then Berkeley came out with the Max Scent Flatworm and it took it away. But it's the power bait, the Berkeley power bait minnow. It's just this little twitch tail minnow. They come in several different sizes. This is the 3-inch one. It's just a tiny, tiny little bait. And this on a drop shot, or this on a tiny little like 20th ounce Ned head or 16th ounce head, can be just an absolute dynamite bait. You do see some of these small minnows type baits really do well on the Demiki rig. That is one area where I feel like we definitely are seeing it. And again, it's surprising to me that we see people throwing small minnow baits on the Demiki rig doing really, really well, and then it's like they just put them away. But this little twitch tail minnow by Berkeley is a phenomenal bait. The bait that I was talking about a few years ago in the Forest Wood Cup that I had the fish commit to it was a 3-inch Senko. Let me get one out for you. So this is the 3-inch Cinco, comes in a little tiny pack. I mean, it's just a tiny little bait, very, very small when you compare it to some of the other ones. But again, you can rig this wacky style if you want. You can rig it on a drop shot. You can rig it on a small jig head again. But it's just that small, tiny profile that really gets it, you know, that the fish just get it and they eat it. And there are not many of these little 3-inch sizes made. So that's one of the baits that I really like to use in that circumstance. I'll even go as far as cutting that down even a little bit more to like a 2-inch size. One bait that you hear about in the North Country for smallmouth, but don't really hear anywhere else, are your little tubes. This is one of my favorites. This is the ISG, the 2-inch mini intimidator tube, or it might be 2 1/4 inch. Just a tiny little tube. And I'll tell you, this works great on a small tube head if you can find one. I really like to throw it on a drop shot. It excels for smallmouth, but I catch a ton of largemouth as well on it. Again, it's just a bait that the fish don't see. It's a tiny little bait that it's just hard for them to deny. And I'm talking like when you're out and you're fishing either on an ultra pressured body of water, or you're fishing when like you've just got really terrible conditions and the fish are showing complete inactive levels, that's when these baits really come into play. The next one that I really like is the little Trooper. This again is a little over 2 inches. It's a small craw. This one I'll put again on a drop shot, or I'll put on a jig head. And it's just another killer little bait that I think was brought out for smallmouth, but it will do wonders on spotted bass as well as largemouth. And then the last one that I've got here is another one that I really like, and this is one I like to throw on a drop shot. This is the little 2-inch Yamamoto, it's the Yama Minnow. Just a small bait. Very, very good on a drop shot. Very good, again, you know, if you've got a tiny little jig head. This is one that I've used successfully as well for the Demiki rig. But it's a tiny bait. I mean, even on the package, it doesn't have a bass on the package. It's got a bluegill, a perch, a crappie. Doesn't say anything about bass. But this bait will catch you a bunch of bass as well. So guys, anytime you're stuck in conditions that are really tough fishing, whether that's because of the weather conditions that you've got, or the fish are just in a very lethargic mode, or you're on a body of water that is just so pressured with boats, don't be afraid to downsize completely and go with your micro baits. I'm telling you, it will catch some fish. And the fun thing is you'll mix in a bunch of other species as well when you're using it. So the action is generally very good because you could catch your bluegill, your crappie, white bass, anything else mixed in. But don't forget about your micro baits, guys. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and stay tuned for tomorrow's video.